Ready? Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Geekdom Underground podcast. It is your boy JRG coming at you on this beautiful morning with my co-host.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Philip Hernandez, COO here at Geekdom, and I'm excited for today's episode.
Stoked.
I am stoked for today's episode of Geek Underground. We have an amazing guest, a pillar of our community, the head of DJ Law, up on the 8th floor. So if you've seen us, or you may have seen David Jones either at our events or walking around Geekdom. He's very active in our community. So David, welcome, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful morning down in the basement, the Geekdom podcast studio, state-of-the-art podcast studio, available also for rent. But so today's about Mr. David Jones. So David, if you would please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Toronto, Canada.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I stumped you on that one.
I have no more questions.
Yeah, and so I grew up there. My family moved to the New York area when I was starting high school. It was a job promotion my dad had. I went to college and to law school in Boston. Lived in Los Angeles for about 15 years after law school. And then my family moved here in the late 90s. Been here ever since.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what moved you from New York and Boston area all the way to California?
Well, it was really, truthfully, it was kind of this romantic vision being a kid growing up and seeing, palm trees and oceans and remembering that, at the end of November, they'd play the USC-UCLA football game and it was gorgeous weather, not a cloud in the sky, fantastic weather. I'm like, I think I might be able to do that. And when I went interviewing there, that was just reaffirmed.
Yeah.
The day I went there for the interviews that ultimately led me to decide to move there. When I landed at the airport, I was getting a rental car, and at the counter, the person said, "Well, Mr. Jones, we don't have the car that you had reserved. Would it be okay if we gave you a convertible?"
Hey,
and I think I could struggle through that, and ended up spending the weekend there. And it was, places I was interviewing. We went to a Laker game. We went to USC-UCLA football game.
Wow.
As it happened. So that kind of came full circle. And then spent Sunday morning at a place in Malibu on the beach. And I was like, I think I can do this.
That's awesome. So was it everything that your childhood dreams had led it up to be?
Oh, I loved living in LA. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you do like on your off time?
Well, I think the greatest thing about living in a place like Los Angeles is, the weather, obviously, everybody knows is pretty much, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
But for me, the thing about LA was, people come there from everywhere. It's a fabulous melting pot. But it also is a place that is close enough to a lot of things that, 2 hours you can be skiing, in 2 hours you can be in Mexico, in 2 hours you can be in the desert. In 2 hours, you can be in the wine country in Santa Barbara. And, so the things you could do on the weekend were just so incredibly wide ranging.
It's the day trips.
Day trips and weekend trips for sure.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you said that you went to law school in Boston.
Right.
And then what made you want to go to law school?
Well, I didn't have some grand dream as a kid to be a lawyer. I mean, I wasn't. Some people get really enchanted by television shows and movies of courtroom dramas and things like that. And I wasn't really that person. When I got done with college, I took a year off before I figured out exactly what I wanted to do. And what ultimately led me to want to go to law school was I didn't know a lot of people who were lawyers. But I had some friends who were a couple of years older than me who had gone to law school, and they talked a little bit about really more like the philosophy of law, the kinds of things that you learn in constitutional law classes. And they were doing maybe we'll touch upon this. I actually hadn't put two and two together that maybe this is a dot connector, but they were working on volunteer legal clinics, and they were
Hmm.
having impact. They were loving what they were doing, even as law students, making a difference for people who
Yeah.
had no access to lawyers. And law school doesn't really prepare you for what a lot of lawyers think is sort of the drudgery of law, which is like spending hours scanning over every word of a contract, or
Yeah.
spending hours reading cases and trying to figure out how to synthesize them all, and those sorts of things. But I mean, sort of the romance of the law kind of drew me in,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I enjoyed it.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is it like earlier you talked about the like the way people fantasize how lawyers could be, and I think they get that from like Law and Order or shows like Better Call Saul. Is it like that? Is it
Well, I mean, in the if you when you're doing courtroom stuff,
Yeah.
right? And that was, I mean, I was a litigator for almost all of the first 20 years of my career, and I loved the courtroom. In fact, I'm going to be in a live hearing in the federal court this afternoon, and I can't wait.
Really?
Yeah, and it's because it is, and I don't quite know that I appreciated this until I started doing it, but there is a very performative aspect of standing up in a courtroom and saying, "I'm David Johnson, I represent blah blah blah," and when you're arguing to a judge, or you're jousting with your opposing counsel, or in cases where you've got a jury there, you know being a storyteller and trying to find ways to communicate with them, and without ever sometimes looking over at them, make them feel like you're talking to them.
Hmm.
That was it's very challenging, but it's tremendously exhilarating.
Yeah. I didn't really think about that. Did you have were there any other things in your life that drew you towards that like theatrical or performative kind of things?
No,
No. It's
there really weren't. I
really.
mean, I was never in high school, I was never in the band, in the choir, in the theater, never in any of those things. That
And no
just
desire?
never even crossed my mind.
Wow.
Wow.
But that's something that you like about being in the courtroom now.
Oh yeah.
So in so I did read a little bit about you and being in litigation for so many years, and then having like the pandemic happen,
Mhm.
and that whole dynamic shifting of going onto like Zoom. How different was that?
Well, when you're communicating with judges, it's truthfully not that different. I mean, I think the sort of the soft tissue, the marrow of communication, that's definitely lost with Zoom. But I mean, we all see that in no matter what your business is, or no matter who it is you're talking to, that gets lost on Zoom or whatever other platform you're using.
Yeah.
But there are definitely benefits to not having to, drive to the courthouse and park and lose 3 hours when you're doing a hearing, right?
Yeah.
You just log on and boom, you're done.
They probably don't talk about that in law school either.
No, they don't. No, I mean, I'm old enough to. I mean, we didn't even have computers in my office when I started practicing. So,
Man, wow. So how have you managed like the evolution of how you practice law over the years?
sure. Well, for a long, long time, I loved the jobs that I had in big law firms. We worked on big matters for big companies, and because they could afford to pay you to really, really sink your teeth into things,
Hmm.
you could sink your teeth into things, and you could come in, and like recording time was easy, right? It's like I showed up at 8:30 this morning, I left at 6 p.m. Other than when I took a break, all my time was on this one thing, right? And you can really, really dive into things, and you can become somebody whose knowledge about a subject is a mile deep.
Mhm.
And it's kind of cool to really, really be a deep level subject matter expert. As my career in big law moved along, I kind of came to realize at some point that yes, I have knowledge that's a mile deep on a whole bunch of things, but I also was somebody whose breadth of knowledge was shrinking, because in bigger firms, and it's not really a strategy, it's just sort of a natural evolution, that once you become the person who is known as, oh yeah, if we've got this, we go, David's the person that we put on it. And so gradually anything that's not this kind of falls out of your repertoire.
Oh, wow.
And, there were times when people would ask me questions like, well, the survey company on the house I'm buying, they screwed it up. What do I do? And the truth is, like, I was like, I don't know. And, and I kind of realized there were a lot of muscles I was not, it's not even flexing. I'm not even using.
Yeah.
And, this goes back to like 2015. I was law partners with Deborah Innocenti, now Deborah Plissette, and she and I were both kind of feeling a lot of the same things in terms of our frustrations with, there's enjoyment, but there were also frustrations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, she first, but me a little bit later, we started to become involved in events that were in the downtown tech community. We'd go to Geekdom events. We'd go to Scaleworks events. We'd go to Tech Block events once that got started. And it was really fun. It was just like immediately, it was like, whoa, there's this whole universe of people out here doing cool things that like were never part of what I was exposed to working in bigger firms. And we started talking about, okay, how do we do work with these folks? And, and it's not a criticism of either the potential, people who would become our clients or the big firm. But one of the things about big firms that makes practicing easy is they have a very defined fee structure. And, who comes in the door is the people who, or are the people who, you can pay these retainers if you're new, you can pay this hourly rate. You can't do that. Well, good luck to you, find somebody else. And as we were working with companies that were just starting things up, their financial profile just didn't match with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started to think, okay, well, how harebrained would it be for us to say, the heck with it, we're going to go try to do our own thing. And we went back and forth for, at least a year before we both kind of had this moment where we said, we concluded, you know what, like, this feels like it's right here in front of us. If we don't do it, we're probably going to always regret it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided, we started, I don't know, like metaphorically sort of grabbed hands and sort of jumped off a cliff together and hoped that there was water, in the river at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much doing my own business that, it's been it's not even like a chapter 2. It's like act 2, the sequel, or, whatever the phrase would be, that, what I do now is so diametrically different from what I did before. And I've come to realize that as much as I enjoyed working on really big matters for really big companies, I love working with people more than that.
Yeah.
And, when people and companies are just starting out, I have come to realize that, I can be way more impactful in what they're doing in their business and like how they approach, translating sort of their core values as a person into running a business. That's immensely rewarding.
Yeah.
In a way that's very different than the rewards you get from being in a big firm.
Yeah.
And you may have noticed that in my office, for a long time, I've had like a series of Post-its up on the wall.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right. And some of them are, we're there just to like create a diversion or an illusion when I started taking crap for the fact that there was absolutely nothing on the wall. It was basically this sort of mediocre pale blue with some cracks and, chips and cracks in the wall, and there was no art. And one Post-it I'm always going to keep up there is one that says "Find wall art." This was one that a former intern and paralegal, Daria Galbraith, put up one Friday when she was nagging me, or not nagging, but she was giving me a hard time about having nothing on the wall. And one of the Post-its that will always stay up there is one that says "Rewards come in many forms." And the origins of that is that after about a year, of being in business. I was out on a Christmas Eve with one of my kids who told me on Christmas Eve morning that he needed to go get a gift for his girlfriend, and he didn't want to go to the mall, and like maybe I knew some cool places to go where he could find something for his girlfriend. And after holding my breath and saying, "Why are you waiting until Christmas Eve morning to do this?" we ended up going over to the Broadway News collection of stores.
Solid.
And we found something for his girlfriend, and then we walked into Richter Goods, the clothing store that's
Shout
run
out.
by Mario
Mhm.
Guajardo.
Mhm.
And I had met Mario earlier that year at a panel discussion he did with Dax, actually, in the event center. And I don't know, I just kind of liked Mario. And we were talking about how the year had been and all that kind of stuff. And while it was a conversation with him, while my son was talking me into walking out of there with a custom fitted shirt, which cost 3 times as much as the present he got his girlfriend. Mario and I were talking, and he asked me how things were going because he knew I just started a business about a year before. And I said, well, it's going, in a lot of ways, it's going great. I mean, so I love what I'm doing. I love the people that I'm working with. And the thing is, the money is not coming in like, we had projected.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that'll come. And he said, just remember, rewards come in many forms. And that really stuck with me. Every once in a while somebody says something to you and, they don't realize that they're saying something, they don't realize that they're being your Yoda or they're being your Obi-Wan, but they say something and it just kind of sticks with you.
For sure.
That stuck with me. And it kind of made me appreciate that, yeah, sure. There's plenty of people that I work with who could never pay me what I used to earn, doing work for people in the big firm, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I know I feel like I'm making a difference in what they're doing.
Yeah. It fills your bucket in another way.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's super interesting.
And you can tell it's super genuine also. Like you embody the hashtag be helpful, like not a lot of not a lot of other people do. And it's just really cool, for sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. I've never worked for a big firm, but I do have some experience. My family is a family of lawyers, and I was the black sheep. I didn't go that route, but I would imagine that when you're working in a large firm like that, it's pretty secure and it's pretty steady. Like you have a flow of clients, like you said, that they're going to be paying you what they're going to be paying you, and it's going to be on time and you're taken care of. But going to like making your own firm that's like a startup. I mean, you have to build all of you have to build in the HR, the hiring, all of the things that you probably didn't have to worry about in a larger firm.
Yes. And, one of the things that I came to realize very quickly is that big firms have people who do everything for you. And whether it's a deliberate decision or it's just kind of the way things ended up, there are people who will do everything. And the structure is built so that the only thing the lawyers have to do is client work, recording time, billing it, and collecting it, period.
Mm-hmm.
Every single other thing, we got a person for that.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, your Wi-Fi network is down and, you've got to become the IT person or, you've got to figure out, okay, well, we've got somebody who's on payroll now. How do I figure out, how to do this in a way that, I'm not going to get sued for doing payroll wrong.
Yeah.
You have to figure out a lot of things. And, I was talking earlier about, developing muscles and flexing muscles that you didn't have before. It's kind of given me, a very different appreciation for what people who are starting and trying to grow businesses are going through.
Yeah.
Because there's a part of it that when you leave a big firm, the first thing you do is you're like, God, that firm had all these policies and procedures I had to follow. And now I'm on my own and like, yay, no policies and procedures. But then, within a few months, you're like, oh, now I know why they had all those things. And, you kind of build you have to sort of rebuild all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even things like wall art. They probably had plenty of it.
Absolutely. Well, I have to on that. I have to give a shout out to the 3 interns who worked with me this summer, Chrislyn Perkins, Senna Peckin, and Mai Vo. So we were sitting in the office one day, and Chrislyn, who's an art and business major at Trinity, said to me, I paint murals. And I said, no. And she said, what do you think about me painting a mural in your office? And I'm like, well, what would you do? And she kind of said, well, I don't know. What do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? And we kind of went back and forth on the I don't knows for weeks. And then eventually, sort of collaboratively, we came up with the idea of doing something up on the wall that sort of played on the theme of the Post-its.
The Post-it
notes. And so about 3 weeks ago, they took a couple days in the middle of the internship to sort of move everything around in the office. And there's this giant, like incredibly awesome mural up in the office now that's, kind of this mod, themed thing that if you know about the Post-its, you're like, I know exactly where that came from.
That's awesome.
And
now that you say that, because I've sat in your office numerous times and I get distracted and I've seen the Post-it notes. And now that you say that, I've seen the mural and it does have that inspiration.
It totally does. No,
so
cool. And I mean, it's kind of completely remade the office. It's incredibly fun. And it's probably the best conversation starter on Zoom, because I usually use that as the background. It's the best conversation starter on Zoom I think I've ever seen. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's really fun.
Yeah. So I love what you've done with your own firm. We had we were fortunate to office right next to you as we were planning out operations on how we reopen. And the culture was awesome. It definitely bled over. We could feel it, and the energy was great. I think you do a wonderful job with that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, making the decision. We talk to a lot of guests on here, and something that they have in common, a lot of them, is that they go from some sort of stability and then make a jump to then start their own thing. I think everybody has their own internal process on how you make that decision. And I know you had a partner in Deborah, but what was your internal process, and how did you come to the decision that, like, I'm going to leave this pretty safe, stable thing and go into this fog of uncertainty?
Well, it was a couple things. One of them was, realizing on a personal level that being part of a very different community, the downtown startup and technology community, was so different from what I was doing. And it was a completely fresh challenge. I was learning a lot of new things. The energy of the people who are in that community it's just different than the energy of the people who are working as a deputy general counsel or a general counsel in a publicly traded Fortune 500 company. I mean, the energy is just different. And I was also at a point, candidly, where my youngest kids were leaving for college, and that's a milestone in everybody's life.
Yeah.
And I kind of was thinking, if I don't do this, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
I could spend however many more years working in a big firm. Or I can say, well, I've done okay in that world. And if I don't take a shot at this, I'm never going to do it. And I don't know how hard I would have regretted it if I didn't do it, but I'm awfully glad I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, both on a professional level and truly on a personal level, it's been, a rebirth, and people that I used to work with, and people that were in sort of my circle of friends and coworkers, they notice it.
Yeah.
One of the high points of the last few years was there's one afternoon I was, at an HEB, buying groceries, and I ran into somebody who I'd worked with, I don't know, like 10 years earlier. And, she'd gone on to work at, the courthouse and some other place. And, we were just talking about what we were each doing. And after a minute, she just kind of paused and she looked at me, like, you seem really happy. And I'm like, and I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, boy, I can't dream up a better compliment. for somebody, then you seem really happy.
Yeah, for sure.
And running a business, like every business, has its highs and has its lows. And the lows that you experience are very different and way lower than they are when you're working for a big company.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the safety net and the cushion of all of the things that big companies provide.
And there might be a person to deal with that.
Right. Well, there might be a person to deal with that. Exactly. But, when you're working in a big company, you're never looking at things like, can I make payroll?
Yeah.
You're just not. And, can I afford health insurance? You just, those are not things that come up. And, every business, every young business, at some point has looked at things and like, do I have to let somebody go? Because, we've had a slump in revenue, even if it's a seasonal one. Do I have to, can I afford to provide the people who work with me health insurance?
Yeah.
Those kinds of questions. I mean, you don't think about those things, but they, they carry tremendous weight when you're the person who's responsible for other people, in a way that's very different than being, somebody's boss, doing evaluations on staff members, or your more junior colleagues in a big company. But the highs that you experience are, mountain ranges higher.
Yeah.
When you're doing your own thing, because that you did it by yourself, like 100% on your own.
Yeah. You built this house.
And there's always, a village of people who helped you. And I've had, an incredibly supportive village of people who've helped me and encouraged me and mentored me. And, and frankly, half of the people who've been like my most valuable mentors are like, I don't know, they're, I'm not that young, and they're half my age or less. And, they teach me things and say things to me that, we can laugh and smile and have a good conversation. But I've had more conversations in the last, almost 5 years since the firm started, where I walk away and I'm like, I end up thinking about something that was said in that conversation, as a life lesson, as a business lesson, as, a piece of encouragement on something or another.
Yeah.
That really makes me, appreciate the people that I've gotten to meet and work with.
Yeah. You talk about, I'm really thinking about what you said about that's the highest compliment you can receive, when somebody else tells you that you look happy and you seem happy. When you talk about your time in the larger firm, it doesn't seem like you were unhappy. It seems like things were good there too. You just wanted something more. Was that right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was, I was very fortunate in the firms I was in to have projects I loved working on, to have, I have great stories from big firm life, and working in, it's, feeling like you're at the top of your profession.
Yeah.
That's a cool feeling.
That's a great feeling.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
And knowing that people who, are in different parts of the country who've never heard of you are coming to you because they know of you as the, one of the leading experts in the country on blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, I it's work travel, so it's not, the same thing as, leisure travel or vacation travel. But, I got to go to like 40 states in the course of, the time I had in big law firms, and a lot of places I'm pretty sure I would never have gone to.
Yeah. When you say you went to like 40 states, are some of those like pass through, or you went to 40 states and practiced?
There would either be, the case was there because people would hire us for our expertise, not because we were in Texas. And so I'd worked on cases in really all over the country.
Really?
And, I've been to courthouse in Montana, been to courthouses in Florida, and one of the really fun experiences I had was working on a series of class actions for a financial company.
Yeah.
And one of the hearings we had was in what's called a multi-district litigation panel. I won't bore everybody with the details, but essentially, if there's a whole bunch of cases against the same company that are all pending in federal court, sometimes they coordinate them through this thing called a multi-district panel. And they have hearings all over the country, and the judges are not dumb, right? Like, they have hearings in Santa Barbara in the winter, and they have hearings, in cool places in the summer.
Yeah.
And the time that I got to go argue before this panel, they were doing it in Boston. So I got to go spend a few days back in Boston, which is a city I to this day, love with all my heart.
Yeah.
And the hearing was at the big ceremonial courtroom at the Harvard Law School.
Wow.
And nobody knew this before we all walked in, but the part of the audience was the entire first year Harvard Law School class. And so there was, however many hundred students sitting in this audience.
Yeah.
And there was a judge who was on this panel who his main courtroom was here in San Antonio. And this was his first appearance as part of this panel of judges on this panel. And at the end of the 5 minutes of argument we got, I said, and Your Honor, I would be remiss if I didn't welcome Judge Ferguson to the panel. And the judge who was up there made a crack about how his kind of stock phrase was he would call everybody who was ever in his courtroom, he would call them a great American. And he was very sincere about it. Like he would always do this, to lawyers, especially if they had clients there. Like he was really careful to always praise lawyers in front of their clients. So their clients thought, oh, I've got a good lawyer here, whether the lawyer is good or not.
Yeah.
And, when the judge who was running the panel, made a comment, yes, he's a great American. And I said, yes, he is. And, we got like a big, huge laugh from all the students because they had picked up on what was going on. And it was, that was just like cool.
That's such a cool experience.
Oh yeah, it was great. And, the other thing is when you're in cases and a jury trial is over, one of the things that I was taught by the people who mentored me was go talk to the people who are on the jury, whether you've won or whether you've lost, because they're always curious about like what happens when you guys go up and talk to the judge and we can't hear it. And, they always have questions about the procedure. And if there's one thing that I took away from that experience of talking to people who had served on juries after the case was over, was that, everybody knows that when you get a jury summons, the first thing you do is groan. And the second thing you do is try to figure out, like, how can I get out of it?
Yeah.
And, but the people who actually like were on juries and sat through a trial, they came out of it thinking, this system is actually kind of good.
Yeah.
And they came away from it almost always feeling like, having faith in the system in a way that, that's not what a jury trial is intended to communicate, right? You're there, you got a client, you want to win, period. You want to win. That's it.
Yeah.
But having jurors say things like, wow, this is really cool. Like the way it all works. And, that was a really interesting part of being a big firm litigator too.
Ah, that's awesome. Yeah. I've only had jury duty once, and I was the opposite. I was like, I showed up early. I want to go through the process because, and I made it so far, but then they ended up canceling it or something.
Right.
But,
Oh no.
but I know, but it was so interesting. And, that's super cool that you were able to like go to all these different states. Growing up with a family of lawyers, courthouses were always a thing that like my dad would point out whenever we were on road trips and stuff. And that's still something that I always look at. And so knowing that you've been able to go to all these different courthouses, I feel like a courthouse is such a symbolic building because that's like the center of town, or like it's usually a historic, beautiful. Our courthouse is beautiful, and I barbecue a little bit, and the courthouse in Lockhart, Texas is beautiful. I don't know if you've been out there, but man, that's really awesome. So I want to talk about the interns that you've mentioned a couple of times. So
Sure.
You utilize the program, the Students Plus Startups.
Shout out
Students Plus Startups. We love having on the interns, and it's always a great group of individuals. But I've seen the interns that you have, and they're always so engaged. Why do you think that it's important, or why do you hire interns the way that you do?
Well, there's a lot of debate in the world of business about whether you should hire for expertise or whether you should hire for talent and promise. And I have come to appreciate, hiring people in my own business that I want to hire for talent and promise, because I can teach them the things that they need to do to be good at their job. And the first year that I hired somebody in the Students Plus Startups program, she was an art history major and had an interest in potentially being in law later on. And by taking the time to kind of teach her about like what I was doing and the ripples, the sort of the collateral, like we're doing this and it's not just, okay, we have this task to do, but it's like the reason we're doing this is because we want this company to do blah, blah, blah. Or we want, or this person, they're thinking about taking on investment. And so we're going to structure their business this way to make it easier for them to do that. Or we're doing this kind of work on protecting their intellectual property because, they're in a business that's very, very much based on, connecting and making sales through the internet and social media, not so much personal relationships or, sort of the big company kinds of things that are driven, not so much by your social media or your internet presence, but by relationships that you have. And she seemed to really enjoy it. And for me, it was both a realization that I think there's an educator inside me someplace. I think that's part of the reason I love so much working with, with people who are starting businesses for the first time.
Yeah.
Because, law is something that people look at and it's like your eyes crossed, you get a headache, it feels very impenetrable. And when I can make the process of starting a business or figuring out like why is it important that you do certain things to protect your brand as you're getting going, or like, why is it important to spend the money on having a really good contract when they're going to use over and over again in your business, and they come away from it like, oh, I get it. That's immensely rewarding to me, because I feel like, if I'm a teacher and they're a student, well, they're going to get a good grade in the class, or they're going to take the information and apply it in a way that doesn't mean that every time they have something come up in their business that has to do with law, they got to call me. I'd rather kind of be somebody who helps them to grow. So this is counterintuitive as a business proposition, but that they don't need to call me every time that they have a new customer, or something comes up and they're looking at it and like, well, I don't know, this looks like a knockoff of, my brand, or, my marketing phrasing, or, something like that they kind of like, oh, I know how to analyze this. Because those are the people that come back again and again, and it helps to create, relationships that are just stronger.
Yeah.
But I mean, to come back to your question about the internship program. So this summer with the 3 that I hired, that means I've hired 10 people over the 5 years through that program.
Wow.
I have tended, frankly, not to hire the people who tell me in the interview process that they are really keen on going to law school, because I have tended to be drawn to people who, well, first of all, they strike me as interesting, intelligent people who have a level of curiosity that means that even if they aren't in love with the process of, helping me draft a contract, they're going to be really interested in the people I'm working with and what they're doing. And, I've always tried to sell the internship, not so much as, well, you get to be an apprentice in a law firm, but you get to meet all the incredible people that I work with.
Yeah.
And, because I am just so lucky and blessed to work with the people that I've gotten to work with over the years. And I think because I really try to encourage them to, embrace the people that they're working with, that they're working with, and the things we're working with, and like learn their stories, and how did you get here? Because one of the things I know that they all take away from it is a lesson that, life is not necessarily linear. And, many of the people I've hired have been juniors who are going on to senior year. And there's a part of, the thing that's kind of nagging them in their brain 24/7 is, I've got a year until I graduate. The scripted part of my life is about to end.
Yep.
And if I'm being honest with myself, when people ask me the question, well, what do you want to do when you graduate, or what do you want to be when you grow up? The true answer for, I don't know, like 90% of them is, hell if I know.
Yeah.
And, and if I can kind of help them understand that saying they don't know what they want to do when they graduate, or, or not feel the pressure that the thing that they pick when they take their first job after college is the thing they're going to do for the next, 40, 50 years. Well, I've helped them.
Yeah.
And, and I think that they, I feel like I've received incredible loyalty back from all of them. I mean, heck, they painted a mural in my office,
Yeah.
and
sure.
I mean, if they're laying a marker that we were here, they laid a pretty strong marker.
They did.
And, and I've hired most of them to stay on after their internship. In fact, I've offered every single one of them the opportunity to stay on part-time during the school year. And, that's a way for them to make a little money while they're doing something, while they're in college. But it's also, again, an opportunity to kind of keep meeting the people I work with, kind of keep understanding all the really cool things that they do, that make me often think, and I know make them think, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Right. Or, I had no idea you could make money doing that. And, kind of opening up their perspectives to, like, all the possibilities that are out there in life. I mean, that sounds kind of corny, but
yeah, no, but really,
but that as long as you have sort of a core set of qualities like intelligence and curiosity and personal integrity, boy, there's a lot you can do in the world, even if you can't imagine what it is when you're about to graduate college.
yeah, man, that's awesome. And, I feel like I knew the answer to that question before I asked you, because you do give off that energy. And I do see the interns, like, they love what they do working with you. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting a whole lot of valuable experience and, like, entered into this culture. And
Yeah,
all of them are like really, like, they're here every day. They're like in the office, working right outside the office, and like they all seem to enjoy it a whole lot. And they're rock stars, all of them.
yeah. I mean, seeing them go on to do really cool things. They're doing it, but it makes me incredibly proud, because I mean, I'm rooting for them.
Yeah.
And I will say one thing I'll say that has been really fun the last 2 years is that in the Students Plus Startups program, they started a thing last year where they would take teams of people, and one company's interns would do an Instagram stories takeover on a Friday. And the ones that I've worked with last summer and this summer have both, and I've encouraged them to like really have fun with it.
Yeah.
And both years they have found ways to, really like give me grief in the in the course of the stories that they do. And, and I just love that, because I mean, that tells me that, we've created an environment where, they can poke good natured fun at their boss. And I remember last year, they gave you, Philip, they gave you, Philip and Charles, some grief, walking through the big office.
I don't know what these guys do.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, I know. It was a memorable one, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's so great, because that in itself is a compliment. I mean, when you have people who you're working for, who you bring on, and when you have that healthy banter, that back and forth, I've talked about it with Charles, because we do that in our staff too. And like, it's a good sign when they're having that good natured fun with you, because if they're having it without you, that's not a great sign.
Right.
So it shows that they're comfortable. They're comfortable to be themselves, and to poke the fun.
Yeah.
And it makes work fun.
Be honest.
Absolutely.
On that. So while we're on this subject of you helping people, let's talk about the free legal clinics. That's a huge thing. And so for those of you who don't know, the free legal clinics, that's something that that we partnered with San Antonio Startup Week and David Jones to provide some consulting at an affordable, low cost for any startups or entrepreneurs. And then out of that program, they're able to get their LLC. So can you talk a little bit about like Why? Why do you do that?
Over the years, Geekdom and Startup Week have had annual pre-legal clinics in connection with the Startup Week series of events in October. What prompted the current program to get started in my business, and there are very it's very serendipitous that my business and Geekdom and Startup Week all kind of came to the conclusion that we wanted to create a program completely independently of each other. And then when we got together, we realized, oh, you have that idea? Yeah, we've been talking about that too. And the origins of it on my end were last summer, summer 2020. There was a lot going on in the world.
Yeah. To say the least.
There was, we were in the early stages of the pandemic. George Floyd had just happened. And, everybody was, wobbly in terms of figuring out like what the hell is happening here.
Yeah.
And the two interns who were working with me then, Zari Chipman and Montana Meeker, we were often in the early part of the summer last year. There were times when I would swear we were the only people on the 8th floor. Because the Geekdom was only open for people who had offices. Yep. And there were a lot of people, and so community members weren't here. A lot of the people who have offices were not coming here.
Yep.
And I was terrible at working at home, so I started coming in. And then when the internship started, they were living in a hotel, and Zari and Montana and I we were in a conversation, and we kind of realized that they don't really want to be in the hotel 24/7. They would rather walk the 4 or 5 blocks to come from the hotel to Geekdom. And, and we all talked about, okay, you sure you're comfortable with that? Because this was still very early. And we were all like washing vegetables and, being worried about touching doorknobs. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we came in and we ended up having some conversations just sitting in my office talking about, particularly in the aftermath of George Floyd and all of the sort of reawakening that everybody was having about the state of social justice and legal justice in America, and we kind of somehow the past clinics came up, and we all sort of collectively talked about how we wanted to do something more than do black squares on Facebook, and after talking with Charles and talking a little bit with Alexandra and two, we kind of we could do these clinics. And if we do it right, then we're going to be touching people in underserved communities. Yep. And, they'll have opportunities to have access to lawyers and to have access to getting the cost of forming a business covered that they might not otherwise have. And part of the point about access to lawyers is, for most people in the community, what they know about lawyers is the billboards that they see on the freeway and the commercials that they see on television. Mm-hmm. And, those are not the lawyers who are the right ones to help you figure out how to start a business in a way that is likely to be on a positive trajectory.
Yeah.
And so even for people who really they can cover the $300 to get their LLC filed, but they wouldn't know where to begin to go to find a lawyer whose business, whose practice is in helping people figure out how to start a business, and all the things that come along with starting a business in terms of accounting and branding and taxes and payroll, all the things you were talking about earlier, and for the paralegals, they know how to do the part, the filings of the Secretary of State. They know how to do that. That's part of what they all get trained to do. And so when we first started this I can't remember exactly what month the first one was last year, but the signups were tremendous.
Yeah.
And when it came time for me to be the person who made calls to people I know who were lawyers around town, I was really heartened and by the fact that I think every single person I said, "Hey, do you want to come and do this?" They all said yes. And people often think of lawyers as sneaky schemers, and you can't sneeze in their direction without them sending you a bill. And that some of those stereotypes exist for a reason, all right? But
Yeah.
um but the people that I've been in touch with who are the regulars who show up for these sessions, people like Ryan Reifert and Carissa Gonzalez and Jessica Vittorio, who has her own firm in Dallas, and she's not even in San Antonio, and she's a regular at these clinics because she thinks they're cool. And people like Summer Shaw, who's a patent lawyer who has his office here, and some others, and like they come every time. And and consistently they'll tell me afterwards when I'm like, "Hey, really appreciate you coming." And they're like, "No, this is fun. This is really cool. We get to be there when when people are they're right at the threshold where like they've decided to do something, and they're crossing that boundary, that barrier where, or that milestone where they're like, "Yeah, I'm doing this." And and I think for the paralegals, who, because the way the clinic works is you talk first to a lawyer, and then when you're done with a lawyer, if you decided to go ahead and form your LLC, you go to the paralegals and they get all the information down. And while they're getting the information down, they get to talk to people for a few minutes. And, they're the last ones who are talking to people in like, the seconds right before and right after somebody hits, the submit button on filing the paperwork at the clinic, and or the Secretary of State. And consistently they'll tell me this is like super fun.
Yeah.
Because they're catching people at moments when they're really excited, and they get to hear about all the things that the people are doing. It's great. And we're really close to hitting the milestone of having 100 companies
Yeah.
formed since the clinic started in the second half of last year. And we're going to cross that threshold in the clinic in October. And when everybody who's involved in the clinic takes a pause and says, 100 businesses, that's pretty damn cool.
That's badass.
It's
Yeah.
badass, right? And when we look at it, there's a really substantial number of those people who are women, who are minorities, who are LGBTQ. And when we look, at the mosaic of people who have come through the clinic, the mission of helping people who might not otherwise know how to get access to lawyers, and they get like a jump start on forming their business. I mean, that mission is being accomplished.
Yeah.
And it's immensely rewarding to feel like you're doing your part to make that happen.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't even know that, like, maybe I should talk to a lawyer at this point, or if we're going into business together, maybe we should get some sort of a document so that, like, if and when things get hairy, because they're going to, we have something to go back on. So,
Right.
yeah, because you're absolutely right. If you don't have a resource like that, then, like, I didn't get hit by a truck. I'm not part of some big class action lawsuit. Why would I need a lawyer if that's all
I
you
didn't do
know?
anything wrong.
Yeah, if that's all you know. But yeah, that's incredible, and that's such a cool place to be, and a place to be helpful, because that, I think it's twofold. One is having the realization that you need a lawyer, and this is why, and these are the people that can help you. But then two, having that milestone of like getting your LLC. That's such an important piece. That's like a we're doing this now. And that's the feedback that I've heard from people that have gone through that, where they're like, this is happening now. Like this was something we were just whiteboarding or drawing up, but now it's like it's on paper. Like I saw my name. You know what I mean? Like that's really big stuff.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that part of the clinic is that there's the evening where we do all the the lawyer consults and the paralegal consults, and the paperwork gets filed that evening in the next few days. But in the sort of tutorial clinic, or session that happens before the clinic, part of what we all try to emphasize for the people who are signed up is, pat yourself on the back, congratulate yourself for being ready to take this step.
Yeah.
Because most people who have a dream of starting a business don't do it
Yeah.
for one reason or another. And if you've kind of worked up the courage, the determination, the hell with it, I'm going to take a shot at this, to go ahead and go through it and create your own, real life bouncing baby company that's yours. That deserves, congratulations and appreciation.
Yeah. Just awareness of
Awareness.
that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's great. Well, David, this has been awesome. Just talking to you. There was a time when like we were the only ones here in not just the 8th floor, but in the whole building.
Yeah.
And you and I have had a lot of opportunities to speak, but I've gotten to know you so well through this. So I really appreciate all this. As we wrap up, one question that I do want to ask you is, if you think about the times that you're in transition, so you just finished law school in Boston and you're about to take the leap and move to California and follow your dreams, or you have this successful and stable position with a big firm, but you're about to take the leap and do your own firm. If you think about those transitional moments, what advice would you give yourself, or what advice would you give somebody who's in one of those transitional moments?
Well, I've had these conversations with several of the interns that I've worked with, and I've had these conversations with my own kids who are, only a little bit these days older than the interns. And, I think that in those moments of transition, having it's some of these things are real easy to say and they're hard to do, right? But like having a belief in yourself and is really important. Having a passion for the thing that you want to do, whether you're going to be starting your own business or deciding on the kind of job you want to take when you graduate college. Because sometimes the highest paying job opportunity you get is not the one that you should take.
Yeah.
And sometimes the highest paying one is the one that you should take, because you go to work in a high paying job and it's going to create opportunities for you to do things down the road. And when I talk to people about next steps, I try to point to the people that I work with and the signals that I see and the things that I read that tell me that that person is going to be successful. And it's always that they have a really deep passion in their soul for the thing that they're doing. And when you're figuring out what comes next, following that is the thing I encourage people to do the most. Because when I look at, the people that have that core, right? That like, I'm doing this and I don't care how many times somebody tries to knock me over. I'm going to be like one of those, those inflatable toys that you have when you're a kid and you can punch it and it'll knock over, but it'll bounce right back up almost no matter what you do to it. The people who are successful, that's the quality they have, is they always bounce back up, that they can make it through the hard times, and because they know that what they're doing is the right thing. And they also understand that, if you bring, sort of the core set of values of being somebody who's determined to be a lifelong learner, you're always going to want to learn new things and you're always going to be curious about people. Then, even if you follow your passion and it doesn't work out, well, you'll be okay, because you will have learned a million things along the way. And then when you're in your next transition phase, you're coming at it with a perspective that you didn't have when you're in the transition phase you're in right now.
Right on. Believe in yourself. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much.
That's
for
great
that.
advice.
Yeah. Well, with that, Mr. JRG, if you would, please, sir, take us home.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to the Geekdom Underground podcast with our amazing guest, David Jones. You can find David Jones hanging out on the 8th floor of Geekdom So don't hesitate to stop by and say hi. How do people learn more about DJ Law Partners, about David Jones?
Well, we are one of the other things that the interns have helped me with, and this goes back to last summer. I was a procrastinator on doing a new website, but we're going to have one up really soon. It's going to be djlawpartners.com, and we'll have announcements on Facebook and LinkedIn when that's fully officially launched. Should be in the next week or so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everybody.